What's good, everybody? For those of you guys who are new to my channel, my name is Sidney Baker-Green. I'm an international wedding photojournalist and portrait photographer, cinematographer, and colorist. And I have to say, this break that I've taken from teaching color grading has led to so much clarity as to how I want to go forward and be different on this platform with your guys' color grading education. As I stated in my last video, I feel that we have a lot of filmmakers and people who would like to be colorists that are excellent when it comes to some of the technical aspects of color grading. Plus, there's so much technical information out there for you guys to have that you can really grasp onto that pretty easily. But what I feel like is really lacking right now in education with respect to color grading and filmmaking as a whole is making motivated decisions. Why are we creating this look? Why may we lift those blacks and get that milky look? Or why would we go on more of the crushed side of blacks to help aid our look? And so that is what we're going to be doing in this two-part tutorial. In part one, which is what you're watching right now, we're going to take a look at a feature film that I had the privilege of helping one of my students color grade. And we're going to start off, and the node tree and everything's already set up. We're going to go in node by node, look at some of the technical aspects, but we're going to be focusing a lot on the why. What is this doing for our viewer, and how is it leading them down the rabbit hole? And then in part two, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how we're going to match the look in the part one that we're watching right now into the look that we're going to create in part two, which is a completely different look, but we need to match those two scenes so that it gives continuity to the viewer. So before we get into this, I just want to give you guys another opportunity to check out the link in the description down below and up here to a new project that I'm working on that's still not quite ready for release yet, but by signing up and putting your information in, you will be the first to know on how I'm basically going to change the game when it comes to learning color grading. So without further ado, let's go ahead, roll our intro, take a look at where we started, what we're ending with, and then we'll hop into Resolve. This tutorial is going to be a little bit longer, but I encourage you guys to watch the entire thing. There is so much information here and so much thought that went into this look that you're gonna walk away with something. Definitely take the time to take in this knowledge because it only makes you more valuable as a filmmaker and as a colorist to increase your knowledge. It's worth it for yourself. Do it for yourself. All right, guys, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve, and you can see we have a 13 node setup to create the look that we have going on here. Now, here's where we started, and here's where we're at. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk a lot about this look in the look analysis of it, why I chose every single element and why I did it. And we're also gonna go through and look at each individual node to see how it came to life on a technical aspect. Just a quick note before we get started, this is the scene that I have graded. You will see me move over to this scene over here. This is not the look we are creating with this scene. And you will see me use this scene to kind of show you what the motivation will be, which was something done quickly, but it's not perfect. So do not take this scene over here or anything going on for face value. We are gonna create something completely different for part two of this tutorial, which is what we'll be focusing on here. But I really want to focus on the motivation here for a second. Let's take a look at some of the things that we're noticing, especially from the original. Well, the original is very much so bright. And when we're looking at this waveform here, you can see that we're pushing all the way from almost our lowest value to our highest value available. And what we did is we brought a lot of that down to just above the halfway point on our waveform here and the available information here. So first thing we did was we darkened the scene, but let's take a look at the two colors here. I did talk a lot about the teal and orange look and how I think it's overdone, but it's actually something that can be done in a very tasteful way when we're looking at color grading. So why would I choose? You can see here the teal values here and the teal values here and then the orange values over here. And more so, why is the teal, if you notice, the teal is actually kind of coming from this direction. Overall, it is in the shadows, but it's coming from this direction. Well, when we're watching the scene, you notice that she turns and then she heads this way out the door. And then we come here. Now this scene, this is not the grade for it, but you can see it's actually supposed to be a bluer scene to begin with, right? So this blue color here is supposed to represent moonlight and nighttime. So the color psychology behind blue is generally that it's used to create a sense of trust when we're looking at a scenario. Think about a White House press briefing when the White House press secretary addresses the nation. Those blues are there for a reason. It creates a sense of trustworthiness. It creates a sense of loyalty. It creates a sense of calmness. That's all all there for a reason for the viewer to psychologically feel something when they're watching this. Even if they do or they don't, that's a different discussion for a whole different time. So that is one of the reasons why the blue is coming from that direction. But also for teal and orange in general, the biggest thing about teal and orange is that it's a great way to create a sense of contrast, right? So teal and orange are complementary colors. Look at our color wheel right here. We have the teal color right here and the orange color right here as well. And so those are on opposite ends and it creates contrast. Similarly, black and white are complete opposites. And we know black and white is very much so high contrast. We're just taking that black and white concept and adding hues to those values so that we actually have color to them, right? Now, it can give off different emotions, but the reason why I'm also choosing to use blue here in this room is because blue creates a sense of sadness. And when we do it right and we desaturate that enough, when we desaturate the whole image enough, what it's going to do is create this feeling of edginess. It's going to create this tension, and that tension is going to be exacerbated as we come into this scene over here, where it's way cooler now and it's way darker now, and it's gonna have that feeling of, okay, what's about to happen? And that's how we're leading that viewer down that rabbit hole. So that is the main reason for why I chose these things. I did go through and tweak saturation values throughout this. There are some keys that came in. And so that is the overall look analysis. We're gonna go through and talk a little bit more deeply about this in just a second. So let's take a look at some of the technical aspects of what we're doing. We have our color management set up in DaVinci YRGB color managed, and we're using the DaVinci wide gamut, and we're going to Rec 709 at gamma 2.2 because that is what my monitor is calibrated at. So whatever monitor color space you have, that is going to be your output color space. In this case, I am using gamma 2.2. My studio is a little bit brighter so I can get away with it. Use 2.4 if you grade in a very, very dark environment. So let's turn off all these nodes and go through step by step and really think about what we're doing here, why we're doing it, and talk about the technical aspects. So the first thing that we're going to need to do to balance this out from what we have right here is we're going to need to use printer lights. Now, what you do is you come over to your color tab, go to printer lights, and then select printer light hotkeys and make sure it's on. I already have it on. And then come down to this menu right here where it says full printer lights. Take out your smartphone, take a picture of this in Resolve, and use it as your cheat sheet. So you don't have to come back here and memorize it. That'll happen over time and as you continue to do this. But what printer lights allows us to do is add individual stops of color so that we can precisely balance out an image when we need to. Right? So it takes a little bit of knowledge of color theory, but you have a cheat sheet right here, your color wheel. So if you're looking here at your color wheel, right, you see that you have this orange color, and even look at your vector scope. Take a look at your vector scope right here, right? We have this orange color, so we need to add that opposite color to balance this out. And so we're over here, we need to kind of add this blue cyan color is what we see. So how do we do that? Well, we're gonna go through and add those individual colors. So let's take a look at this and how it's gonna work, and you'll see it move here on the color wheel as we do this. So I'm seeing this orange, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in some of that blue. So let's check it out. 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops, right? Now we see that we have some red presenting itself. We've added in that blue, but it's shifted us over to the magenta side. So we would normally add green, but like I said, it's not pure magenta, it's a little bit more red. So the opposite of red in my mind is gonna be cyan. So if I go ahead and add in some cyan, that's gonna be number 1 on our number pad right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Seems a lot closer to what we had going on in the very beginning. Let's go ahead and add in a little bit more blue. And then again, a little bit more cyan. So that was 2 stops of blue, a little bit more cyan. And right about there, if I go through and turn this back on, should be just about everything that I did before with respect to this look. Pretty close. Pretty close. I can't remember off the bat what I did. I feel like I was a little bit more cooler. And I was a little bit farther in, but you get the idea of how printer lights work. So let's go ahead and get back to our original color that we had here. But that is just what we did there. I should have taken it a little bit farther because that was actually the original value that we had going on right there. Oh, actually, I was pretty close. I was definitely pretty close. So that was the first thing that we did is we balanced out our image. We do this in node 1 because this allows us in node 1 to make sure that we have all the information with respect to color there, and it's not going to affect our key later. So I gave myself just more of a neutral playing ground so I can add in the colors where I want it. And now I have this neutral wall where I can really push in color. Take note of the set right here and why this is possible. We don't have many reds going on in here. We have very neutral colors, and then the orange, we have our skin tone, so that's fine. And even the window treatment right here is blue. So it's not like we're gonna have too much going on. This wouldn't work in a situation over here where we got red, greens, and blues and everything over here. And this also wouldn't work in a situation where we have the greens going on over here, right? It needs to be a very neutral color palette for us to do this. So we have that on, and then we're gonna work on our shadows. So what I did here in node 2 is specifically focused on bringing that shadow and dark information down. We definitely finessed that information here. So it was actually a very, very minor adjustment. When we look at what we did just in the dark regions, it was a very minor adjustment, very, very minute. And I brought that shadow value up from where we're gonna be working as if it was going to be, right? You can see here, this is the original key for that shadow value. I brought that all the way up into the lights so that when I brought that down, it brought down a lot more of the rest of the environment as well, and is allowing me to create that white and black contrast that we're used to with the contrast wheel right here. Then what I noticed after I did that was we have some values here that are really hot, really, really, really hot on the shirt. I mean, this is great contrast, but we can bring some of these values down. And then also looking at our waveform up here, we're kind of hot up here. And so then after we mess with the shadows, we come through to our highlights. And what that allows us to do is it allows us, when we pull those down, the lights right here, we pull down those lights, which have a little bit more information, and then we pull down the highlights right here. What that allows us to do is just get a nicer roll off between the values. I wanted it to feel a little bit more even and not too contrasting. So what you can tell here when we actually use these tools, the HDR tools, is that the contrast comes up, but the saturation's not linear with this, right? We have more contrast, but the saturation did not move as if we did it with our curves tool here, which would actually move the saturation with our adjustment. We're gonna go ahead and wait to add saturation in after our key. Why? Because that's going to allow us to change the saturation values without messing up our key and having to go back. So let's talk about our key. So we turn on our key here, and you can see here that I made my skin tone adjustment and I placed the values of what I wanted where I wanted them. Now, I simply added a little bit more of a red to her skin tone because this was going to be kind of cyan and it was going to balance itself out. And you can't see the key here because I did the adjustment in the HDR wheels. If that happens, just go over to your regular primaries, bump up the gamma a little bit, reset it, and then you'll see the key come up. Now this is a very, very soft and subtle key. It's not the tightest. I kind of wanted some of the information to mix in a bit too, which is why you have this haze. It's not perfectly on her skin. It's going to allow for a little bit of mixing when we go through and we add in our layer mixer. But you can see here the information I did capture was the door because it was just going to benefit from that adjustment and that saturation adjustment, and then her skin tone. And I was very careful that you'll see actually when she turns this way, you'll probably get a little bit more of that warmth from the lamp that I'm going to add coming into her shirt. And then when she pulls away, it comes out and actually keys out here so that we get more of that blue. So it's representing that light coming from the different direction as well. And you can see here, it's very soft. So you're going to get that on her eyes and on the part of her face right here that's away from that blue, or going towards that blue rather. And then we have the orange coming this way. You can see here that it's going to look still like the light is motivating it from over here, but we got that blue coming in here. Right? So now from here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in a layer mixer. Why a layer mixer? Well, because order matters, right? A parallel mixer is going to take two inputs, so input 1, input 2 down here, and it's going to turn them into one output and mix them together without that order mattering. But a layer mixer, the bottom goes on top. So our skin tones are going to basically be like a green screen for this, and it's going to go on top of everything else we're doing. So what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to make changes to the image without affecting her skin tones. So let us come over to a nice good scene right here. We're going to come from over here. Let's just get her when she's looking down here, right? And we're going to turn on that key information, right? So we're going to put that skin tone on the bottom, and then we're going to turn on our look on top, right? So skin tones are laid over, otherwise it's going to look like this. That's not what we want. You see the difference? That's why we did that. We have more control over the skin tones. Let's talk about this look node number 5. What I basically did here was just a few things. One, I lowered the red black point. What that did is it actually brought in some cyan. Remember, the opposite of red is cyan. So it brought some cyan down here to start giving me that teal blue look that I was going for. And it's gonna do that in that shadow environment. Again, we're trying to motivate the blue light coming in over here. And then from there, I fine-tuned this in the lights and in the shadows with my HDR wheels because I could have more precise control. So with this, you can see I added in some yellow, and that was to cancel out the blue that was going to happen over here. You can even see here, I need to add in a little bit more of that cyan color in the shadows, but I wanted to cancel out that blue over here and get just kind of a warmer light going on so that I could still have that information as I'm keying it out. So that was the reason for those two things. I set the key information accordingly here, and then I added in those values using, again, that motivation and that thought process behind it. So you can see here, when you have that motivation, creating the look is a little bit easier. You just have to kind of know what you're trying to accomplish. And then to tie everything up on the global adjustment, I decreased the saturation by 1/4 of a stop. And what that allows me to do is it allows the look to just be a little bit more subtle. Remember, we can always put more saturation back in. So that is why I just kind of made it flow a little bit more by taking out that saturation. And also remember the look we're going for, which is that horror look. Now in our next node, I did add in some saturation because I wanted to be able to see kind of what was going on, and that just kind of gives me a firmer basis for this look that we have here, right? We'll take that out in the end to sell the look. So then here's the fun part. We start using our power windows to isolate information that we want. Remember, over here is supposed to be darker. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a vignette around her. And that's exactly what I did. I simply added a power window right here that I can go ahead and track if I would like to. Boom. So it's going to follow me. If I add that tracker information, we don't have to, but that's what I did in this moment. She's pretty stable here. And then I brought down that exposure by a whole stop. And what that does is it just really isolates my subject. And what I did here was I increased the feather to as much as I possibly could so it seems very subtle. It's a very subtle thing that I added to this look. From there, we're gonna start motivating that warm light back in over here, right? This light right here is obviously gonna be warm. So what I did was I did two things. One, I did a luminance key. If we come here and we look at our key information here, I did a Luma Key paired with a power window. And the Luma Key is only going to allow basically every brightness value from about a low of 55.5 up to 0 to be in that. And then I added in some directional control with a gradient for what I want it to happen. So what direction I wanted it to come from. Again, that motivating and guiding the color where you want it to be and controlling that image. And then the last thing that I did in this situation was I just kind of refined the mask so that it didn't look blotchy like this. And so I basically increased my denoise so that you didn't see it jump around. And then I increased my blur radius until it just kind of faded. And that's all that I did in this case to make it seem a little bit more natural in this area. And then once I had all of this set up and what I wanted to go on and where I wanted it to be affected, I went ahead and used my global adjustment here to add in that warm color that I wanted. So again, we're controlling and breaking down each individual part of this image to make it come together. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add, yes, another power window, another gradient, and we're gonna add that blue color coming in over here. Now this is a very, very subtle difference right here. You can see the door just gets a little bit more desaturated. So you may be saying, why would we make this door a little bit more desaturated? Well, when we come over here, we're gonna have to match these wood colors here in our next scene as we're gonna start making our day for night look to make it seem a little bit more like it's motivated by moonlight. This is not my grade here. This is actually what it looked like, right? This is actually, but we need to match that wood color over here. And then in node 5, what I did was I came in and I cleaned up these blacks, right? I made it seem a little bit more realistic and just a little bit more nuanced. And what I did to do that was I simply had my black value set here and I added in the complementary color of that blue that we had going on. So you can still see here that we get some of this blue down here in the shadows, but now it's a much more even gradient across the board, and we're still looking pretty clean and pretty nice. It's still cooler over here on this end than it would have been before. We can verify that by our vector scope and by using our qualifier that we're still on this cooler end. It's just not too dramatic, and we're still on the cool end here. This is definitely the warmer end, so we can see the value differences. We're definitely cooling it down, and that's all we want, is that subtlety. So again, just a quick refining node to clean up the blacks at the very end before we add our film print emulation to really sell the look. Now here in Film Convert, I did a few things. The first thing was I raised my midpoint up to make it darker, and I kept my black point where it was supposed to be. And then all I did from here was bring down the saturation and adjust the temperature just a little bit. Now we could go here. If you wanted to, you could be here. This is completely fine. This is completely okay. But I wanted it to just be a little bit warmer in this case. And actually it may be a better idea to keep it on the cooler side, but maybe just a little bit right there, looking back at this, and then down to 95 to take out that, now not too much saturation, right? She'll look dead. Down to, actually 88 looks pretty good too. So we'll use 89 to take out some of that saturation. And then when we're looking through, again, we're gonna cut here. We're gonna cut here as we do our next grade for part 2. And then we're gonna create a completely different look that motivates. As you can see, there's a lot that went into creating this look, and especially when we looked at where we started, it didn't quite lend originally how it was shot to what the viewer needed to feel. It was overly warm and too happy to really lend to that horror genre that we're working in. So I hope this tutorial gave you guys a little bit more clarity into motivated decisions, and also too some of the technical things that I did. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications if you have not, so that you can get part 2 of our coming up series. And be sure to leave me a comment down below on any other genres that you would perhaps like me to cover, or any other interesting questions that you may have. And furthermore, again, check out that link in the description down below to sign up to be the first to be notified on my secret color grading project. And lastly, guys, follow me on social media and the YouTube fam. Our links are in the description down below. My beautiful people, now more than ever, if you are ever feeling uninspired, uncreative, or just want to give up on life, remember, every day airplanes take off against the wind. Keep climbing, stay inspired, guys. And as always, stay fabulous. My name is Sidney. I will see you beautiful people next time. Peace out.